Good morning, good morning. We've talked the whole night through. Good morning to you. Good morning, good morning. It's great to stay up late. Good morning to you. I'm not Debbie Reynolds. So good morning, good morning. Sunbeams will soon smile through. Good morning to you and you and you and you. Again, I'm not Gene Kelly. But good morning, good morning. We've gabbed the whole night through. Good morning to you. Nothing could be grander than to be in Louisiana. I am not Donald O'Connor. I can barely use one of my feet. Anyway, my mother used to wake me up every morning with a song until at the point I accidentally started to treat her like an alarm clock and proceed to smack at her the way that I would smack at a snooze button. But good morning. Welcome back to Broadleaf. And I hope that I've given everyone a little touch of nostalgia alongside what my singing teacher once called an unclear range of voice. I have been charged with greeting you this morning. My name is Benji Carr. I am the president of the board of the Broadleaf Writers Association and have been now for multiple years. This organization has brought me so much joy and so much opportunity. And I'm really, really grateful for every opportunity that I have to share it with people. I said a couple of years ago that the fact that you are here means that you have taken the first step, that you have invested in yourself. And as a result of that, you are a writer. There is no gatekeeping. As you've seen from several of our panels and several of our panelists, no one ever quite feels done. No one ever quite feels like they made it. They've always got an opportunity to learn more. And you'll see your panelists learn from one another, often in the same session. One of the things that I love so much about storytelling, and a lot of people will disagree with me on this. A lot of people think that writing is solitary. It's closed off. That writers aren't that writers are introverts and that they're always alone and that it's them and the page and no one else. And yet, to that, I offer you this. When you are writing, you have your audience in mind. You are not alone. When you are writing, you have your characters, and your characters come alive for you before they come alive for your reader. They come alive for everyone. You are not alone. We create the worlds we wish to live in. We walk through the stories that we want to inhabit. And storytelling is an act of compassion. What it does is that it gives you the opportunity for 5 minutes or 50 chapters to see perspectives that are not your own, to have experiences that are not yours, and to teach your readers to have an opportunity to escape their own lives for a while, but also to learn how it feels to be someone else. And when the world can be as divided as it is from time to time, that's an act of tremendous necessity. I am so grateful to this organization. Because of it, I became a published author. which I did not expect. I used to sit in every session and ask as many questions as possible, and now I go to sessions and still ask as many questions as possible. And I never expected to get where I am from where I was. And yet I'm here, and I'm here because of you people. So there are some people that I would like to thank because this is this is my last hurrah, essentially, as the president of the board. Next year, if I am back, it will be likely as a moderator, if they'll have me. But this has been a privilege and a delight. And I would like to thank a whole bunch of people before we answer one pressing question from last year. Here goes. I would like to thank Jessica Nettles, who is a board member. She and a writer, published writer, one of the first that we had from our group. She helps me out at 6:30 in the morning when no one else is around. I would like to thank Marianne Lozano, who is one of the most delightfully compassionate and, as you can see, talented writers that you will ever meet. I would like to thank Crystal O'Leary Davidson for just being a total badass. I would like to thank Daniel Lamb for being one of my best friends. I would like to thank Vanya Stoyanova for always being there and for giving me hugs at weddings when I least expect them. I would also like to thank Robert Gwaltney and Elliot Parker, whom I've just come to know and have come to appreciate greatly. Because of those people, we are here. Because of those people, we have the lineup that we have. Because of those people, we have the programming that we have, and I hope that you're enjoying it. And I would like to say thank you to Zach Steele for creating this bizarre, unique animal of an organization. And I would like to thank Will Young as well for being with me from the beginning, first on the conference committee where we planned out the first conference, and then later joining with me on the board. I believe that he is cycling through this year as well. So now, before the start of the next panel, I would like to resolve a question. I don't know who all attended last year, but during the party that we hosted in pajamas, complete with the drinking recipes and the suddenly improvised songs and all of the storytellers, I asked a woman a question, and I am not in the habit of asking this question to most women. And she kept me waiting, y'all. So I'm going to ask again. Carmen Tanner Slaughter, delight of my life, receiver of all of my R&B song voicemails. Will you do me the honor of being my broadleaf wife?
Oh my gosh.
Make me the happiest man to sing Debbie Reynolds this morning. If you would, please. Everybody raise a glass for whatever it is that she's about to say. I have no idea.
First of all, we all love you, Benji. And were it not for you, I would never have become a part of the Broadleaf, the elite squad of literary fantastic things that is known as Broadleaf. So that being the case, I will accept your proposal. To be
I can't dance like that. You'll end up seeing more than one of my chins.
Oh wow, okay. I will. Yes, I will be your broadleaf wife. I mean, I'm pretty much your wife already. So
I love you so much.
I love you so much. Wait, where's my ring? If you like it, you got to put a ring on.
I'm fine. Oh, I'm sorry. Who's quoting Beyonce to me? Somebody, y'all, you do not know the fact that this woman just quoted a person she despises.
Time out. I do not despise her. I just, until her most recent album, did not feel the same passion for her talent as other people. But now I consider myself a junior member of the Bayhive.
You referred to Solange as the talented sister.
It is Solange, and she is the most talented sister, but I really like this album. But where's my ring? I want my ring.
I'll go buy some lifesavers and we'll do it like that old commercial.
That'll be fine. I like the butterscotch.
That I can do.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, my fiance.
Would that be Carmen your Beyonce? All right.
No, Carmen Tanner Slaughter.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, BG. Welcome, everyone. I feel like I need to collect myself. It's not every morning that a woman gets proposed to in front of 40 odd people. But we are going to get to the more pressing matters of the day, which is beginning our first panels. And I want to bring up Elizabeth Copps and Leah Pierre and Charlotte Wenger. And this is going to be our query letter session. But Benji got me so discombobulated that I completely forgot to sort of go over our rules of the day. So I'm going to do that really quickly. So once again, remember that if you have questions during any session, please use the Q&A prompt at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will attempt to address as many questions as time allows toward the end of the session. If you think that you're in the wrong session now or later in the day, links for all sessions are found in the program that you received prior to the conference, and we will be dropping links in the chat during these events. If you have a one-on-one pitch with an agent or a mentoring session scheduled, please arrive 10 minutes before your scheduled time at the provided link. Our official bookseller is once again the fabulous folks at Foxtail Bookshop. They have all the titles from our panelists today and recommended titles on writing that we have curated for you all, and they're all in the bookstore page. That link will be available in the chat and in the program. And on October 22nd at 1 p.m., if you are local, then Foxtail will be hosting our in-person author palooza that will feature several of our panelists and other special guests. We're going to be having the lunchtime chats again today. So just follow the link to the one-on-one room, and that way you'll be able to connect and network with more of our guests and your fellow attendees. We are offering a pre-registration special for next year's conference, and that link will also be in the chat and can be found in the program. You can also become a member or renew your membership when you pre-register. Remember, we are a growing nonprofit, so we rely heavily on donations from our community to help fund the operations of the organization. So if you want to contribute, you can do so when you pre-register, or you can visit the donation page on our website. All right, so we are now back And I'm going to introduce our guest this morning. I didn't get a chance to do that yesterday because we wanted to read as many letters as first pages as we could. So we've got a little more time this morning. I will start with Elizabeth Cox. In the summer of 2010, she did what any starry-eyed word nerd would do. She used her savings to move from Florida to New York City with the goal of doing something, anything related to books. Elizabeth has dedicated herself to the care and management of author careers. Her business philosophy is simple: to foster relationships across the industry that are equitable, transparent, and long lasting. And she's very excited as she continues to build Cox Literary Service and her list of award winning and eclectic clients from her beautiful home in Denver, Colorado. And if you see her beautiful background, she's sitting there with her fancy special mural that we're all very, very envious of. I couldn't stop looking at it yesterday.
Thanks for adding in the beautiful. I appreciate that. I don't know if I put that in the official bio, but thank you and congratulations on your upcoming nuptials.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Next, we have Leah Pierre from Ladybird Literary Agency. She briefly moved to the East Coast to attend Rosemont College and to pursue her dream of working in publishing. She graduated with her BA in English and history, and having accomplished that dream, she moved back to the South to begin her next adventure. In addition to searching for the next commercial YA or adult project that will hook her or make her cry, she's currently pursuing her MA in publishing. She spends time enjoying the company of fictional characters more than people. When she's not in the company of fictional characters, Leah hangs out with friends and family, cooks, and catches up on movies and TV shows she is always behind on. Totally get that. I have like a DVR full of stuff that I never have time to watch. So thank you. And finally, we have Charlotte Wenger. She is a literary agent in the Boston area with Prospect Agency. Prior to joining Prospect, she was an associate editor at Page Street Kids. She has her Master of Arts in Children's Literature from Simmons College, now University. She represents authors and illustrators of children's books, ranging from board books through YA, but especially picture books, as well as select authors of adult nonfiction, memoirs, and biographies. And you can find her online at charlottewenger.com or on Twitter at WilbursBF_Char, and her latest wish list can be found at Manuscript Wishlist by searching her name. Thank you, ladies, for joining me this morning. So we're going to dive right into these letters. The first one, now we got it on the screen. In 1960, a 5-year-old girl begins a 3-year run from the FBI. In the Wind is her story. Gangly, precocious Casey Adams adores her glamorous mama Bernice, who's enthralled by Roy Capehart, a charismatic con man. All three, plus Casey's older brother Glenn, live in rural Missouri, lying low until a moonless night when the feds swoop in. The family makes a cross-country escape in a 58 Buick, crossing the U.S. Southwest and the Mexican border. At first, the kids revel in life on the road, throwing themselves into radio sing-alongs, I Spy, and an endless game of cop spotting. As the horizon widens and the scenery changes, the journey seems like a long Technicolor dream. The dream fades as the family starts fleeing motels without paying. The adults steal credit cards and assault other travelers to finance their fuel, food, and booze. Life becomes a series of drunken arguments, brushes with death, and episodes of child abandonment. After 2+ years hiding in Mexico, Bernice and Roy leave the kids there alone in an impoverished mining town. Only 8 and 11 years old, Casey and Glenn wait months for their grown-ups' return. Malnourished and riddled with parasites, they depend on kind homeless campers for scraps of food. A young American vagabond becomes their unlikely savior, launching a 1,000+ mile trek for the siblings back to Missouri. There, Casey must face not only her traumatic past, but more challenges to come. With rare street smarts, uncommon heart, and an uncanny sense of humor, she manages to survive and in many ways thrive. In the Wind, 70,000 words, is creative nonfiction targeted to young adult and older women, especially mothers.
Okay, I'm excited about this one. And before we launch into the nitty gritty of each query, I have a question for Leah and Charlotte. And so usually when I do query critiques, I have a formula, and I want to know if you two have the same formula. And it's very early in my time, so I have a cheat sheet over here. I'm so sorry. So I have dual screens, so I'm looking off into the distance. But usually I advise an author to start off the first paragraph with genre, word count, elevator pitch, and comp titles if it's applicable in that first paragraph. Sometimes it looks a little better or it flows a little better if you have those comparative titles a bit further down in the query. So I just have a feeling, because I've done these sessions before, and usually that's my main critique, apart from, maybe revamping some of the meat of the actual description of the story. So I just wanted to put that out there front and center, because this is a good example of, a beautifully written query. But I do think that the pieces aren't quite where they need to be. Okay, cool.
I agree.
So that last paragraph should actually move up to the front. And I also love to see a bio paragraph from the author. I talked to this author yesterday, so I'm really excited to see your query. I do think that the genre, as we discussed, should be different. I wouldn't categorize this as creative nonfiction. In fact, I would novelize it, because it has a lot of Jeanette Walls qualities. Glass Castle, Shoot the Horses First, that sort of memoir, but I know that this is about someone the author knows. So I think that you can take a lot of cool fictional liberties.
And I think honestly that you can, because it kind of read a bit of a summary to me, which is, I know it's difficult to kind of parse out which of what a query should be, if it should be leaning more heavily on the summary side or just kind of getting right to the action. And you really want a query to get right to the action. You're just kind of introducing the premise to the agent, so they kind of get an understanding of what's going on when they open the pages. And I think a better way to do that would be to cut everything before, after 2+ years hiding in Mexico, because that kind of starts us off right in the thick of it. Like we're like going in it and we're already questioning, well, why are they hiding in Mexico? Like our interest is already peaked. And I think it just kind of gives us a better overall idea of what the story is and what it's going to be. And the rest can just be explained, through exposition or background in the story.
Yeah, I agree. It was a little long for me in terms of the summary and getting to the meat of it. Yeah, and as Elizabeth kind of touched on already, I was a bit confused by the kind of the target audience of young adult to older women. That seems like a really wide range to me. And I wanted it to be a little bit more specific in terms of genre. And I also really always appreciate a good but relevant bio paragraph. So I wanted to know a little bit more about the writer themselves and their writing and publishing background.
And
then
just one last note. So looking at the ages of the characters, 8 and 11, if you do choose to fictionalize this, it would probably be a middle grade novel. One of my authors, this was published, I think in 2015, her name is Cora Bell Schaffner, and she wrote a middle grade novel called Almost Paradise, and it has some similar themes of abandonment by parents and the trauma that young people go through when they can't rely on their parents. And so I know that there's a market for that sort of thing. And you might want to dig in a little bit to comparative title research if that is a place that you want to go with this book.
Okay. Dear Agent, I am seeking publication of my first book, Demons Run. Given your interest in genre fiction with a literary bent, as well as character-driven stories that explore the natural environment and systems of power, I think Demons Run will be a good fit for your list. Demons Run is a literary fantasy novel directed at genre readers and adventurous environmental fiction readers. A thought-provoking eco-thriller, Demons Run channels both the inventive fantasy of Marlon James's Moon Witch Spider King and the environmental epic of Tim Powers' The Overstory to combine elements of genre fiction and nature writing. Demons Run prompts reflection in a time of quickening environmental crises. The book follows two people struggling to protect their home in the face of political machinations and greed. Featuring wild fairies, ferocious gator men, and a mysterious demon, Demons Run explores wildness and captivity, avarice and compassion, imbued with the tumult of adventure and the love of a place in the midst of extinction. The story begins in a remote village of Newtown, where a young church assistant, Arthur Chappell, meets a group of high priests. The high priests draw him far away from home and embroil Arthur in summoning a demon. Amid a background of civil unrest, attacks by fairies, and growing tensions over resources and land, Arthur seeks to understand the motivations of the high priest and his own strange connection with the demon. Simultaneously, Emily Palazzi, a member of the local government, works to solve the murders of three lumberjacks. As unrest grows, she scrambles to keep the peace and confront the killer. Arthur and Emily's journeys lead them both into the fairy forest, where they learn of a dam that threatens to destroy their home. The book, about 150,000 words, is the first in a planned trilogy informed by my work on environmental issues across the Southeast, where I have worked for a variety of environmental organizations. Demons Run is deeply influenced by Southern natural landscapes and through compelling narrative expresses the urgency of our current environmental moment. Thank you for your time and consideration. A full manuscript is available upon request.
So especially liked the opening of this. I think the word count could be moved up, kind of as Elizabeth had mentioned before, and it does strike me as a little long in terms of word count. But and I know agents are torn on this or very subjective on this, but I appreciate when someone querying kind of briefly mentions why they're querying me or why they think their work would be a good fit. Some I know prefer for you to jump right in to what the story is about, but I always appreciate that intentionality is shown and just kind of little personal touch in a query letter. The query letter itself did also strike me as a little bit long, keeping it to one page if you can. And I want to know a little bit more again about the bio of the writer. I thought it was really interesting that to know that environmental background that they bring to the story. But I wanted to also know a little bit more about their writing background as well.
Yeah, I agree with Charlotte in that I like in that first paragraph, why are you querying me specifically? I think that's always a nice touch. Carmen, do you mind scrolling up a little bit? I have a question for Leah because I feel like this perhaps is more of a genre that Leah looks at as opposed to Charlotte and myself. How do you feel about the word count of this sort of thing?
I was very concerned when I saw it because 150,000, especially if that's just the first book, is very, very long. And I know a lot of agents, myself included, will unfortunately pass on the word count. So I'd suggest going through and it kind of that indicates there needs to be more cutting. And this is because it's just one, it takes a long time for people to read through. Two, books this big for debut authors don't often sell. It's just a lot to print as well. So it just makes publishers, when it comes to like P&L statement, it makes them kind of question where this will fall, really question, is the price going to be worth, the acquisition? Are they going to, earn back their money if they take on this huge book? So I would definitely recommend cutting where you can. And then also just getting into the query, being that, this is meant to be fantasy, I'd expect less about what the inspiration of the book was. You can talk about that, after you, like, during an agent call, when you have that call, but rather really focus again on the story, what's taking place. So what's, prepping the agent for what's about to take place, what they're about to step into. And I think the author really starts to get into that with kind of like the story begins in the remote village. And then being that I'm assuming this is a dual POV, as you mentioned, to characters. The first paragraph should be after, like, your intro paragraph should be about Arthur and like what he's facing. And then the next should be about, I believe the other character was Emily. And you kind of already have that set up. So if you just kind of break those two paragraphs up, that'll give you more room to talk about the story, what they'll be going through. And I don't think you need this, the book follows two people. That paragraph you can get rid of, because a lot of this will come out in the story. You just kind of want to prep the agent for what they're about to read. You don't want to give everything away. So I know that can be very difficult to kind of like concisely put, your work into one thing, but just remember, we just want to know like the beginning stakes, what's starting this off, what's important about the story.
I like that idea, because my first thought was to switch the second and third paragraphs and then also make what's now the third paragraph more active. So in a remote village of Newtown, a young church assistant, Arthur Chappell, meets a group of high priests, and keep that really active voice going the whole time. But Leah, I totally agree. You could just cut that second paragraph because it's not really giving you the meat of the story. You have such a short amount of time to hook the agent or editor.
So we have a question I'm gonna ask before we move to the next letter. Based on this previous discussion, what's an ideal word count range, especially for debut authors?
Depends on the genre. There's a lot of resources online that you can look, if you're writing YA, for example, you can just Google like ideal word count for a young adult novel. Another really great thing to do is just to walk into your local bookstore or Barnes and Noble, go to the section, the genre that you're writing in, and just start looking at the books on the shelf, and you'll start to notice that they're all about the same length, give or take. So flip through those, hold it in your hand, you'll get a lot of ideas that way as well.
All right, next letter. I am especially interested in submitting my memoir to Schaffner Press because my memoir fits your mission as being of social relevance and universal concern. It is a personal story that chronicles events relating to integration and political unrest as I, a young white woman, viewed them in 1968 to 1972. Its title is Looking for Jazz, a memoir about the Black college and Southern town that changed my life. Coming to the South to teach at Fort Valley State College, I knew I was against war and against segregation. But in the next 4 years, I found out there was a lot I didn't know, and the course of my life was altered personally and professionally. This will be my first book, though I have others in the works. I worked at Fort Valley State for a total of 46 years, rising to the level of full professor and serving in a few administrative positions towards the end of my tenure. My poems have appeared in such journals as Plainswoman, Golden Poets, and Midwest Poetry Quarterly. My articles have appeared in Encyclopedia of African American Literature, 2005, and New Georgia Encyclopedia, 2003. I have 1.8 thousand friends on Facebook, and I publish a blog at annahollowayWrites.com, my immersion in the Black experience. My newsletter has 520 plus subscribers and is growing. My 58,000 word manuscript is complete, but as I see that you prefer books of over 60,000 words, I'd be willing and able to add more scenes to the story. I also have a full book proposal, including marketing plans, that is ready to submit. Synopsis: Looking for Jazz, a memoir about the Black college in Southern town that changed my life, covers the years 1968 through 1972. The Black college where I came to teach and the town of Fort Valley are new terrain for me, arriving as a young woman from the Midwest. I see open racism in Fort Valley and feel the local suspicion of a white outsider like me. I learned the culture of the college, and then it cuts off. I think maybe she was thinking first page.
Do you mind scrolling up again, Carmen? I think this is a great example of how the bio is so robust, and I love to see it. And the piece that isn't connecting for me in the query is the actual substance and description of the story. I wanted a lot more from that paragraph. Leah and Charlotte, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I wanted almost a little less of the bio and a little bit more of the content of the writing of the memoir. I do think it seems interesting and important to kind of note her bio in relation to the content. And the perspective that she's approaching it with. But I wanted to know a little bit more about the actual memoir content itself.
Yeah, I agree. And I'd also like to know more about what what her perspective is bringing to the table, what, kind of, I'm sure there's a lot of stories about this. So what is kind of like the new, I don't want to say new spin, but like what is she bringing to the table that, hasn't already been done before? And kind of that approach. And kind of just more just what she's going to be touching on in relation to just again what Elizabeth and Charlotte said, what you're going to be touching on in relation to this overall topic, what are you adding to the conversation?
I'm also curious who the audience is specifically. I think that should definitely be mentioned. And again, going back to the bio, like I do think it's so important to show your platform when you're writing any type of memoir. But this in particular, I want to see. I think the only part of it that I don't know, I'm torn on is the author's a poet. Do we need all of the outlets that they've been previously published in, or can some of that be truncated? Because I do want to know about the blog. I do want to know about the newsletter. I do want to know the social media stats.
Truncating the poetry because it, to be honest, is not relevant to what she's writing about. So it doesn't really add anything. It's just like kind of to me, it's like, oh, I'm a poet also, like, okay, cool. But again, kind of going back to this to the subject matter, it doesn't really connect in that way. So I think that's a good place to cut and then kind of add more about yourself and how you connect to the subject matter. And then I'd love to hear, because I assume you and Charlotte, Elizabeth, do more nonfiction than I do. Your thoughts on Facebook as a, mentioning Facebook as a platform, because I'm not sure, like, these days with social media being so robust, if that's something that publishers look at, that specific platform.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I think that Facebook and Twitter have definitely become the two heavy hitters regarding social media in publishing right now. I think Instagram, if you're an illustrator, of course, or a picture book author. But yeah, I think that it's important to not only put your social media stats, God, that sounds awful, but And then, even especially with nonfiction, sometimes outlining your plan to grow that even further is incredibly important. And so not that a query letter is the place to do that. And I don't know what this publisher's guidelines are, or if the author plans on having an upcoming conversation with the publisher, but I do think that it is important to, talk to your publisher, talk to your editor, talk to your agent about, plans to grow social media. And if you don't have a plan to grow social media, how do you work with your publishing team in order to make that happen?
Yeah, I think this is a genre where platform is particularly important. And so it is good to note that, at least to start in the query. Other genres, I would say there's not as much emphasis that needs to be placed on that. But the other thing that kind of stood out to me too was the word count, which did seem a little short for me for a memoir. So I think they seem to be aware of that, the writer does. But I think rather than saying this is something that I could add to, I would say go ahead and work on that and bulk it up a bit before you take it out and query it.
Yeah, if you can get
since
it,
that's something you already seem to be aware of. So
yeah, definitely. That's a good note. So between 60 and 70K, if that's feasible for you. Yeah.
Okay. Dear Agent, a teenager wakes from a coma with a frightening new ability, a video game that manipulates reality. A detective tracks a dangerous killer, unaware that something far more ancient is tracking him. A battered wife strikes a devilish deal, but it's her husband who pays in blood. And with every passing night, a trio of dimensional spirits seek a new vessel to manifest their infernal glory. Fully complete after 4 years, Still of the Night, 143,000 words, is an epic literary horror novel, a sort of Donnie Darko meets the Tommyknockers tale of small town horror. Led by an ensemble cast, it's an ambitious, brutal, lyrical, blood-stained Stand By Me of demonic possession, and murder. Hefty, moist amounts of murder. I am actively seeking representation, and truth be told, am searching for a true advocate for my work. I'm aware that at 143,000 words, a debut horror novel is a hard sell. That having been said, I've spent the last 4 years polishing this manuscript to a sleek, heat-seeking missile. Additionally, I hired an outside editor for the final polish, making sure this complex story hits on all cylinders. To further embarrass myself, I have never much considered that any of my previous manuscripts should be considered for the film television market. But with the dual timelines, wide range of storylines and characters, and precision of material, this would make one hell of a miniseries. Last of all, I submit that this story could very well be separated into a 2-book series.
I'm just gonna off the bat throw this one to Elizabeth and Leah just because it's much more in their realm, in addition to not being like children's YA.
There's a little more to the
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. With the literary flavor of Andy Davidson, John Langan, and Stephen Graham Jones, the mind-bending complexity of Catriona Ward's The Last House on Needley Street, and Chuck Wendig's The Book of Accidents, the genre savvy of Lauren Bucas, and the dark humor of Grady Hendrix's twisted younger cousin, Still of the Night is a supernatural puzzle box of dreams, possession, shattered reality, and ultimately an investigation of evil itself. Needless to say, it will be an absolute honor to work with you on this project. Per your submission guidelines, I have attached the first 10 or so pages of Still of the Night and included an author biography below for your review. Would you be interested in having a look at the full manuscript? Thanks so much for your consideration, and I look forward to hearing from you. Best regards.
I do love how punchy this is and how voicey, which is an interesting thing to say about a query letter. But sorry, can you scooch up again, Carmen? Okay, so the only critique I have for this one, I mean, I definitely would kind of copy and paste some of these paragraphs, like putting some information up a little higher, like we talked about before. I actually don't mind in this one that it doesn't start out with title, genre, word count, that comes in the second paragraph. I like that first paragraph a lot, and it really reminds me of what you see on like an Amazon page with right before a book description. Like, I don't even know whether to call it an elevator pitch or not. But you know, it's like a haunted mansion, a tortured spirit, blah, blah, blah. And then it, you know, segues into the heart of the story. The only thing is that there's a lot of comps here, which is great, but there's not an actual description. Like when I finish reading this query, I'm like, wow, this sounds cool. And then I think, wait a second, but do I actually know what this story even is? So I think that the author just needs to pull back a little bit on those comps and really ask themselves, you know, how can I describe this book in a paragraph, which 143,000 words, I know that's hard to do, but I believe in you. And so, yeah, I mean, just the way that you structure your sentences, I mean, hefty, moist amounts of murder, Jesus, that sounds awful and wonderful. So, you know, I think that there's a lot of great parts to this letter. It's just missing the mark a little bit in what agents are looking for in that short, punchy query.
Yeah, even though this isn't a genre I work with or represent, I think that I did appreciate the voiciness of it. It stood out as distinct to me. And one other thing that stood out to me at the end was the kind of somewhat rhetorical question that I didn't feel was necessary, of like the would you be interested in having a look at the full manuscript. I think that's kind of we know that that's what you want to know, so you don't need to necessarily state that. So if you're looking for even little things where you can trim, I wasn't sure that the question.
Speaking of trimming, I think you could take out the last two paragraphs, to be honest, because as as Elizabeth said, like the last paragraph is chock full of comp titles that we don't really need because you've already addressed them. The one line I do like in the last paragraph, sorry, if you go back down, still the night is a supernatural puzzle box of dreams, possessions, shattered reality, and ultimately an investigation of evil itself. I think that's a great line to keep. And I think that could lead into what Elizabeth was also saying, that you need to add more kind of an overall, like, what is the story about? And that was going to be my other suggestion. After that first paragraph, I think there needs to be a paragraph to tie everything together, to talk about like the true overall plot, you know, how they all connect together, what they're going to be, you know, more in detail, what they're going to be facing. And I think that would be great. And then this third paragraph, this just really feels like you're talking to the agent, explaining it. And I don't really think it's needed, to be honest, because a query letter is just to tell the agent about the story, you know, what they're going to be about to read, to get them ready to go into your pages. But this kind of just distracts from that. So this is kind of a conversation that can be had later if, you know, it goes further. So those are my suggestions: getting rid of the last two paragraphs, adding in another paragraph after the first to really round out everything and connect everything and just make it clear about what the core story is.
And Carrie just asked, when you talk about needing to hear more about the story, are you talking goal, motivation, and conflict? Like you want to hear the stakes? Yeah, exactly. So everyone, I want you to go to, let's see. Actually, I can just do this. So I just Googled Stranger Things description. And what popped up was Netflix's elevator pitch. When a young boy vanishes, a small town uncovers a mystery involving secret experiments, terrifying supernatural forces, and one strange little girl. So that's your elevator pitch, right? And then The description would be, you know, set in the 1980s, primarily in the fictional town of Hawkins, Indiana. The series centers on a number of mysteries and supernatural events occurring around the town and their impact on an ensemble of child and adult characters. And you know, you can take it one step further, of course, about, you know, who these people are and what they're trying to achieve, right, by the end of the series. So something that I always tell authors to do, again, is look at the back of, you know, a book description, look at a book jacket, go to Goodreads descriptions, go to Amazon descriptions, because that is, that's a query, that's a pitch, right? That is the description that you want to include in 1 to 2 paragraphs in a query letter.
All right. Let's see. All right. How do you survive when the world is your enemy? The Mud Snake is an adult apocalyptic fantasy that blends the folkloric world building of The Wolf and the Woodsman with the emotional turmoil and high stakes tension of The Road. It is a standalone novel of 130,000 words and has series potential. Dar Fallow lives beneath the cataract, a thick film between the earth and the sun. It causes the seasons to shift suddenly and unpredictably, so that agriculture is dying, game animals have become as rare as mercy in war, and flood, storm, and snowstack one upon the other like bones in a mass grave. Here, hope drowns in sudden floods of violence as cannibalistic hunters prowl for food. This is Dar's world. Despite being a Steepman, a race reviled as uncivilized by the vermin around him, Dar joins the militia, rising to the rank of captain and doing his duty for nearly 70 moons. A return to his wife and 2 sons is scant days away when Dar spots a necklace hanging on the chest of a hunter. It is the sigil of Ceres, the god whose departure created the cataract, damning them all. Such profanation is evil enough. To see the symbol of good around the throat of one so vile, but to Dar, it is the ultimate in horror. Before he left for war, he gave that necklace to his wife. Having no choice, Dar abandons the militia and, accompanied only by his friends Caleb and Horace, walks the road toward a devastating revelation and a divine discovery. My fiction and nonfiction have appeared in the Blue Mountain Review, Sanctuary, and Family Life magazines. I received my MFA in creative writing from Reinhardt University, and I have taught English and creative writing for over 20 years. I am a member of the Atlanta Writers Club, Horror Writers Association, and Broadleaf Writers Association. My first novel, Forlorn Hope, was published by Northwest Publishing, Inc. Thank you for taking the time to consider The Mud Snake. Kind regards.
What a perfectly formatted query letter. You hit all the right notes. Chef's kiss.
The only thing I think I would suggest is just taking out "this is Dar's world," just because, you know, he's already said like he lives beneath the cataract, so we kind of know that this is his world. But that's just my opinion. But I think again, it hit everything. It's really good.
Yeah, it's also so interesting to read this after reading the first page in our session yesterday. And, you know, I think that this letter really hits all the right notes in terms of world building. I love how you describe the cataract. Yeah, I love everything about this description. And this is a weird comment, I guess. And again, I don't know this genre as well as Leah does. How do you feel about the title Mud Snake? Because to me, that almost feels more like swampy, like Southern thriller, you know?
Yeah, I'd question how it correlates to it, and that would be something I'd be like, when I'm reading, I'd be looking for like, okay, when is that going to pop up? Where is that going to come from? So that's a very good, and so I feel like until I actually read it, I don't know for sure if like if I could speak to if it's accurate, if it like actually pops up. But that is a good question that I would be on the lookout for. And I also want to say that this is a perfect example of the query letter prepping the agent for what they're about to read. Because if I had read this query letter before I read the first pages, I wouldn't have had many questions about the first pages that we had about the world building, because you do a good job of setting the scene and explaining the world that we're about to go into.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. I feel like this answers a number of the questions that we had yesterday when we read the first pages. And so I think it is interesting to consider like what the reader is going to be jumping into with the first page, as opposed to like how we're prepped here in the query letter, because obviously we did read it differently. So I think that's something to keep in mind, is say someone jumps and reads the book, starts reading right away without really reading, say, a jacket copy or a query letter. So I think this does the query letter's job well, but thinking about how then some of this correlates into like how the reader might be entering into the story. So.
And Jonathan asked if we minded the fact that The Road is an older comp title. My rule of thumb actually is if you use an older comp like this one, as long as you have 1 to 2 other contemporary, and by contemporary, I mean no more than like 3 years old. And that's just because the market changes so frequently and reader tastes change. And that's why we want these contemporary comparative titles, because at a publisher, a sales and marketing team is going to be looking at those newer titles to see where your book fits into their list and how much money perhaps they want to shell out, because they're doing these beautiful things called profit and loss sheets. And so they want contemporary comparative titles in order to see how certain books in your genre are doing in the current marketplace. So that's why comparative titles are so important. However, The Road to me is such an evocative pick, and I can, just by saying that, I have a feeling of the tone of the story that you were writing, so that didn't bother me. You know, you might want to even include one more comp title that is a bit more contemporary, just to offset the choice of The Road, but I think it's okay. The same thing in film. If you choose a film, then I would choose, you know, 1 film or television show and 2 literary comps. Sorry, I need blinds in this office. I have to keep shifting. I'm blinded by my stupid window. Okay.
All right. Okay, next letter. Josie lives her life by her mother's brilliant works. A best-selling novelist with a gift to bring to life any story or character she wants, her mother has always ensured Josie never suffers and never fails. Anything they need or want rests in the power of her fountain pen. Write it and it is real. Cross it out and it disappears into fiction again. But one dark and stormy night, Josie's mother disappears, leaving Josie alone with her story unfinished. When her mother's powerful pen falls into her hands, Josie must decide what to write. She removes her failings, gives success to herself at work, and creates Adam, the perfect boyfriend for her heartsick and lonely cousin. But characters, real and imaginary, don't always behave as they should. At work, Josie can't keep up with the industrious reputation she's crafted for herself. There's no spark between her cousin and Adam, no matter what Josie writes. Instead, Adam falls for Josie, and Josie might be in love with him too. As Josie struggles with her feelings, what is real and what is imaginary, she must also contend with the ghost from her mother's past. A failed rough draft reappears, determined to take the pen and get his revenge. To save the man she created and reunite with her lost mother, Josie must decide: live her life by perfect words or write her own story as she goes. Inkheart meets Jane Austen's Emma. Penned is a 100,000 word young adult fantasy novel.
I love this premise. It sounds really interesting and really amazing. The only thing with the query letter, this one again kind of feels like a summary. So I think it could be truncated a little bit to just kind of really focus on you know, what Josie is going through, again, those stakes, the opening action, but that's really the only thing. But I do think the story as a whole sounds really amazing.
100K for a YA fantasy, though, is quite long. And to Leah's point, you know, moving that information up into the front of the query, genre, title, word count, elevator pitch. Just a couple of things I didn't understand why, like how this pen works, the origin of this magic, I suppose. And I know that that's a lot to delve into in a query letter, but I wondered if there could be like a line that explains not only like how this mother and daughter came into possession of the pen and why exactly Josie's mom disappeared. Because further down in the query, you know, Josie is trying to reunite with her. So where exactly is her mother and why can't she get back home? And why does she just disappear into thin air?
I'm going to make this complicated and disagree with you, Elizabeth, because I think those are all questions that could be answered in the story.
Yeah, no, I know.
I know. See, this is a great point about us being subjective and us wanting to see, agents wanting to see different things.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious for Charlotte's opinion because you do Kidlit.
Yeah, I think I lean a little bit more with what Leah said, in that those questions that are raised are ones that make me want to read the story. And so I don't necessarily need them answered or addressed in the query. I think structurally, I would like to see a slightly different structure and rearrangement with the query, and a slightly more pared down kind of synopsis summary in the query. And I want to know more about the writer here as well. I think we're totally missing the bio. So I think moving up those comps and word count, kind of like you had mentioned before, Elizabeth, and giving us a really sweet, tight 1 to 2 paragraph entry into the story, I think is what would work best in this case. And then that should leave a little bit more room to learn about the writer and their background. But I agree that the premise is really, really interesting, and it does do the job of getting me to want to read the actual novel. So in that regard, it's successful, I think.
And
Okay,
I think what
you
it
heard
is,
it from Leah and Charlotte. Ignore me.
and I think what it is that the premise is so strong that it makes me suspend my disbelief long enough to like go to the page to read to find out those questions, because I still have those questions, but it's like a lot's going on here, and it's really interesting that I'm like, okay, you're hooking me at all the good parts, and I'm willing to go to the page to find those answers. The other thing that I'd like to throw in, kind of going back to your point, Elizabeth, from I think the last query, is that I'd like to see another comp here, because you're using Jane Austen's Emma. So another kind of contemporary comp, and then just maybe a little bit about why you chose those, kind of like what its influence like by Penn, and kind of specify why you chose Penn, if that makes sense. You don't have to go into full detail, but like pull out the themes that you're kind of comping to.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. One Man's Walmart is Another Man's Graveyard is nearly complete 40,000 word horror dark fantasy novella, best described as Grady Hendrix's Horror Store meets BBC One's sitcom Ghosts. When developers get approval for a Walmart supercenter in small town Canton, Georgia, they don't let artifacts from 200 BC or the remains of Native Americans get in the way of the future site of 100,000 square feet of discounts. Archaeologists are brought in and given 3 months to collect what they can, but tons of concrete cannot contain thousands of years of rage from the now unearthed medicine woman and the tribes who lived, died, or were removed from the site. Employees learn the rules or lose their lives. 1, never work in patio and garden. 2, let Chief pretend kill you. 3, never say medicine woman out loud. June Batter loves her new job in toys and her theatrical and quirky department manager, Sam Tidwell. For some reason, the rules don't apply to June. Is it her Cherokee heritage? Does the medicine woman have bigger plans for her? It's a little bit of both, but mostly it's the Halloween pop-up shop that brings a short piece to the store. When June and Sam dress mannequins in Native American costume, the medicine woman mistakenly thinks her tribe has returned. Toys is a huge hit for the Walmarters who believe they are getting a free, immersive, haunted experience. But the Thanksgiving Day pilgrims and the removal of the medicine woman's faux tribe turned Walmart into Wraith Mart overnight. Sam, his eye always on the store manager position, ignores the signs, and Canton's Walmart Supercenter goes up in flames along with him. With help from the medicine woman, June survives and even leaves with a little extra, a toy dog and another linked novella adventure for June called Bigfoot's Bait. I am an associate editor at Southern Literary Review. My linked short story collection, The Bystanders, is being released in April 2023 by Moonshine Cove Publishing. I'm a member of the William Gay Archive and as such, edited posthumous works for the late Southern author, William Gay. I also advocate for Southern authors and events on my blog, Southern Read. I have an MFA in creative writing from Reinhardt University, a BA in English from Kennesaw State University, and a creative writing certificate from Emory Continuing Education. In 2018, I was awarded the James Dickey Fellowship and acted as an editorial assistant for the James Dickey Review. In 2019, I won the Dr. Robert Driscoll Award for Excellence in Writing on Regional Themes and the Faculty Choice Award also for Excellence in Writing. My published work may be found at Well Read Magazine, Heavy Feather Review, Georgia Gothic Anthology, Springer Mountain Press, 5 Points, a Journal of Literature and Art, James Dickey Review, Sanctuary Journal, Sediment Literary Arts Journal, and Family Life Publications. Memberships: Broadleaf Writers Association, Horror Writers Association, Atlanta Writers Association, and Georgia Writers Association. Thanks for your consideration. I look forward to hearing from you.
Leah or Charlotte, do you want to go first? Because the author and I actually talked about this yesterday in a different session, so I'll chime in, but I'm curious for your thoughts.
Well, one thing that stood out to me is another comp title came to mind, which is Superstore, which I love that show. So it just immediately, as like one of those big box stores, came to mind. But I think if you're going to have one or two kind of film TV comp titles, I think like what Elizabeth had said previously, you want to have some more recent contemporary book comps in there as well. I think this struck me as a bit long, especially for a novella that's only 40,000 words. I think you do it's a nice job of kind of setting the world up, but it just went into a little bit too much detail for me. So I think the premise is really interesting, but I just wasn't feeling kind of engaged and hooked enough with the query. I also think the bio, while it's relevant in terms of writing experience, did feel a little bit too long, and again kind of going into a little bit too much detail than what I needed. But that's very kind of, I don't know, general feedback. I don't know if either of you wants to speak more specifically to anything, but that's what kind of initially stood out to me about this.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm torn because this is really good at, like you were saying, Charlotte, at setting the scene and giving us the information up front, but it's like, it feels, I just don't know where I would cut because it's a lot of information, and I'm not sure, like, it feels like a lot of it's getting on every piece is kind of hitting on action. It's like, oh, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. So which is why I'm torn, because it's like it keeps us moving, and it like introduces one thing after the other. And I know we don't need all of it, but I'm like, I don't know which one, you know, to lead with, to which should stay, because it's all kind of relevant. So it sounds like a really cool and fun and interesting plot. It's just, again, like kind of really picking and choosing what you think is the core that really stands out, and then again just leaving the rest to kind of come through the page. And I do agree that the bio is a little bit too long. That's a good. Someone asked, should the query letter give away the ending? No, I don't think so. I'd like to be surprised by the ending.
I'm
I
okay
agree.
with it. And sometimes people don't give away the ending in the query, but they do in the synopsis. And some agents
Mhm.
ask for a query and a synopsis. I think that a synopsis should definitely give away the ending because you're giving every single beat of the story. I'm not convinced that this is a novella, and the author and I talked about this yesterday, but to me, I think this could be fleshed out into a full-length novel. And knowing the horror market, that is something, not that horror doesn't enjoy novellas, but I'm seeing so many horror novels be picked up lately. And so I think you should really lean into what the market is seeking. And
Mhm.
just from this description, it sounds like there are so many interweaving plots and characters. I think you could easily, you know, add another 20, 30,000 words and have a super fun novel. And that would be my recommendation, instead of doing a linked novella collection, which this is actually the first time I've even ever heard of a linked novella collection rather than a story collection or a series of novels. So I do think that you're setting yourself up from the beginning to make the road harder. And the last thing we all need in this industry, especially as authors, is to make your road harder. So
Those are hard to sell.
novellas can be hard to sell for sure, unless it's a smaller publisher that maybe feels like they have a little more freedom and flexibility. And then, you know, people can say, but Elizabeth Nightfire just published T. Kingfisher's new novella, or Loot, or, you know, Cassandra Kaw's Black and Teeth. And so they exist, but I see them existing as standalones. And so if this is something that the author wants to turn into a series, for example, then I think that that piece makes it difficult. But it's quirky and hilarious and fun. And I would
Real quickly, because we got about 2 minutes, but there's a question about what do you cut from the bio, the pub credits, if that's something that you would cut for this letter particularly.
yeah, I mean, I would even sit, let's see, I like the part where I'm an associate editor at Southern Literary Review. I, you know, have an upcoming linked short story collection releasing with Moonshine Cove Publishing. I like, you know,
I
the
don't think the
memberships, but
advocate.
instead, like the published, like you know, my published work. Hold on, sorry.
I was going to quickly say, I don't think the advocate for Southern authors and events, Southern blog is needed. That could be cut.
You could even say, you could even put in a link. I don't know if you have a website with all of this information, but you can even say, you know, to find out, you know, more about my published works, please visit me at, and then link it in your query. That can be a nice way to shorten. And as an agent, I would click on that because I am interested to see who this author is and where they've published. But I would, instead of, because the bio paragraph here talks about all your publications, which are super impressive in your background, I also want some more personal details, like why did you choose to write this story? I feel like you have a story, and I would like to know it. So I think that you can kind of cut that publication piece of your bio in half, tell us a little more about you, and then link us.
And I'd also love to hear your thoughts on this, Charlotte and Elizabeth. If, since the author has a lot of publication credits and it's very robust, do you think their degrees are necessary? Like, should they touch on one or the other? Or, you know what I mean?
I mean,
I think that,
yeah, sorry, go ahead, Charlotte.
sorry. I think the MFA to me is slightly more relevant because it would also be more recent than the bachelor's. And the certificate in creative writing specifically, I suppose, as well. But I think those are kind of additional things that maybe could be included on the website that wouldn't necessarily need to be mentioned here, where space is a little more precious. But
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I kind of glossed over that part and my brain just went, oh, this author knows her shit. Like she obviously by this paragraph, you know, she has a lot of experience in the literary world. So it was almost less about the actual like places and publications and more like, oh, okay, an impressive resume. That's great.
If
All
I do
right.
agree, I'd like to know a little bit more about why you chose to write this story.
So we are at a little bit over our time. So I want to thank all three of you for doing this with us this morning and give everybody a little bit of a break before the next session starts. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day. And again, thanks to all the people who submitted because it takes, like Elizabeth said yesterday, a lot of courage to submit a first page and or a query letter and to put yourself out there. So congratulations to everybody. All right. Thanks.
thank you.
Thanks, Leah and Charlotte. That was fun.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you both.
Bye, everyone.